All right, good evening. It is 7 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. My name is Stephanie Smith. I'm the Director of School Counseling here in Berners Township, and I'm very excited to see all of you. Thank you for coming out here tonight on this rainy night. We're finally getting the rain, but unfortunately it's tonight for our presentation, so thank you for joining us this evening. We're very happy to have you here. The team to my right is an outstanding group of professionals. They are a fun group. They're incredibly dedicated. They are passionate about all aspects of their job, but especially this very topic, and working with your children on what we know to be a very special time in your family as you prepare for the next step after Ridge High School. So I cannot emphasize enough that you are in the very best hands with this team. And I tell it to parents all the time, when you have one of them, you have all of them. So they work together as a team. They are a brain trust, and they have put their heart and soul into this presentation tonight, making it, with all of their years of experience combined, making it something that is meaningful to you and what we hope to be very helpful to you as our community. So tonight's presentation is broken into two different parts. The first part is your typical slide deck, which will give you information about the process that they have created to walk you through the post-secondary planning or the college planning process for your students. So we know that this is an enormous process, and so they've created very specific steps and recommendations for you, and so they'll go through those recommendations throughout the evening. The second part of the presentation is a Q&A. So we know that you have questions, and they're here to answer the questions for you. And so we will open it up to your questions. My ask for you is to keep your questions general so that they benefit all of us here in the room, and that if you have any specific questions about you or your child, you are always welcome to contact your counselor individually after this evening. So keep your questions general, and be aware that we are recording this evening as well. I will make sure that the recording will get into your inboxes after this evening, so within the next couple business days, and I will also post that to our website as well so that you can go back. That also enables you tonight to just sit back, to relax. You'll get the slide deck, you'll get the links, you'll get the video, and so that you can really just take everything in and ask your questions. Let's see what else. At the end, we do have a short survey. We're asking for your feedback. We do take that very seriously. We go through all of it so that we can curate and tailor these type of evening events to contain the information that you're looking for. All of this information with college admissions is ever evolving and changes every year, and so we're always adding new material, and so your feedback will be valuable to us as we move forward. I also would like to make a plug, speaking of surveys, that the district has sent out the strategic planning survey to parents. If you got that text message or that email from our superintendent's office, and so I ask you to take a moment to, after this evening, to fill that out as we, as a district, are working on our strategic planning goals for the next 5 years. So with no further ado, I want to thank the team for everything that they've done, and I will pass it on to Ms. Coviello to get us started.
Hello, everyone. Thanks again so much for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. So this is like the same presentation that we gave juniors earlier today. So basically, just, again, as Ms. Smith said, just covering recommended steps that we give to juniors throughout this year regarding post-secondary planning. So when we say the word post-secondary planning, we said the juniors, it can evoke different types of feelings. Some students may feel ready for the next step, some may be uncertain, not sure what to do, and that's completely fine. Whatever they're feeling, we're here to support them throughout this journey and process. We're here to answer questions. If you have any questions, reach out to us so you're not alone. So we're here to support you and your student throughout the rest of this year and into their senior year. So goals for this meeting, we're going to explain our roles as school counselors, introduce our Ridge High School post-secondary website, describe the multiple post-secondary pathway options, presenting the 10 steps for junior year, and then just to help you feel more confident in what you should be doing junior year. So our role as school counselors is to support and advise during the entire post-secondary planning process. We answer any questions that you have. You'll also be having individual junior meetings with all of our students. That can be anything post-secondary planning, maybe what they're thinking of doing after high school. We're going to discuss their schedule. So it's really individualized for what they need at that moment. Again, we're here to help you. So now I'm going to highlight our Ridge High School awesome website, our counseling website, which has so many resources in it. So I am going to show you a visual. Okay, there we are, a nice picture of us. So you can refer back to this in the left-hand side here under 11th grade planning. So again, this is all of these steps that we're going to talk about. So you can refer back to this. Some helpful tips, we recommended students to take some time to just look at the website, see what we have to offer, because there's a bunch of resources. For example, we have standardized testing support. That's all the way down here. We have resume and interview tips. We have military, if your child wants to maybe join the military after high school. College visits, that's something that I also wanted to highlight. Specifically, we already had our annual college fair in October, but this is also helpful regarding sign-up links that students can go to our website and sign up. College rep visits in the media center. We even host college workshop series hosted by us school counselors for seniors. And then one new thing that we have this year is career representative visits. I just want to quickly highlight this because it's really awesome. So this is from the Pathways program. So students can sign up right here in a link and just have exposure to a new career. For example, we have, some of them have already passed, but we have an FBI special agent coming in December. So it's just cool to see what major did they take or what's their job like, and just to get more information about that. So they can sign up for that. And then just helpful tips. Events and presentations, that's another one. Like tonight, we're all here, so thanks again for coming out. But this is where they're all listed, as well as where you can find the presentations and videos. So again, super helpful resource, and yeah, that's about it I'll cover for now. There we go. All right, post-secondary pathways. So college is not the only pathway that students take after high school. They can go to RVCC for 2 years and transfer over to a 4-year college. Students join the military as well. We have our own military liaison, Miss Miraview. She's sitting over here. She's a great resource. We have multiple events throughout the year as well. Military options, Air Force, military, Army, Marines, trade schools as well. Students also join the trade. Whatever pathway that they choose to take, we're here to support them in regards to that planning. Some students take a gap year, or it can be a gap semester before maybe they solidify their plans on what they want to do, or maybe they just want to delay, going to college for a semester, for example, or directly into employment. So we're going to go into the 10 steps now. So step 1 is considering their schedule and transcript. So when we talked to juniors about this earlier today, we just gave some helpful tips and what to look for on your transcript, how to actually read your transcript, and things to just consider. So I'm going to click the actual transcript so it's bigger. This is an example one. Her name's Jenny Genesis. And just so you can see that there. So what we recommended, for students is to consider multiple things. So in our individual junior conferences, we're going to be discussing their schedule with them. So consider, certain classes that they want to take for senior year, such as you don't need to take 4 years of a science, but just consider what your interests are and your strengths are. For example, this student is into science, it seems. An A, enriched, and then they took an honors. So maybe they want to take a 4th year of a science. So, and then also that goes into the amount of appropriateness of the amount of rigor you're taking in their schedule. So they don't have to take all AP courses. Maybe they can emphasize a science course they want to take, or a math course, or certain electives that they haven't taken throughout their past 3 years. So this is a great time to figure out other interests that you may have as well. So, and then also considering the balance of those courses. So, with regard to planning for next year. And then some things about the transcript in general. So you have your cumulative GPAs on the bottom for each year. So this is what all junior, transcripts look like. Right now, they don't have any grades or credits. But again, on the bottom right here, that's the cumulative GPA, the credits earned. So these are things that you just want to make sure you're looking at, making sure you have enough credits. I mean, obviously, we meet with the students and go over their schedule just to make sure they're not missing anything, but also consider like graduation requirements and electives too. So those are a couple of things that you can consider when looking at your transcript. Okay. Trying to get back to the main. Okay, there we go. All right, step 2, your standardized testing plan. So juniors have, mostly all taken the PSAT and gotten their test results back, and that's accessed through College Board. So they can access those results there. So in general, just consider standardized testing plan. So when do they want to take a test, an ACT or an SAT? To figure that out, go to the website first, such as College Board or ACT, just to see what test dates are offered. And then you can plan out, when you want to take it. For example, maybe you have a spring sport, so maybe you don't want to take an SAT for the first time right in the heat of the season. Maybe you want to take it over the summer, so you can just focus on that. So register for any tests that you intend to take, and then just plan ahead just to see if you want to maybe take it once or twice, and then just create what works for you and your schedule. So some other things that I want to highlight is test optional versus test blind. So test optional is the university, accepts SAT or ACT scores, but you can also not submit those scores, and if you decide not to, it won't be held against you because they are a test optional school. They just won't look at that part of the application. Test blind is where the scores will not be considered as part of the application process at all, and they won't look at them. So each school has different policies, different ways they go about things with test optional, test blind. So always check the college's websites, like the actual website for specific policies. Fairtest.org is a list of all test optional schools and what schools are test optional. Test preparation, so on our website, I don't think I clicked that as well, but there's all resources as well as test prep. And we also have a free test prep resource on Naviance, which is called Methodize, where they can have free practice SAT or ACT tests. Super scoring, so that is when a student takes, for example, an SAT twice, but maybe they did better on math the first time and then did better in English the second time, so they'll combine those scores, then you can send that score to the school. And then the TOEFL and Duolingo, those are English proficiency tests, so if your child's first language is not English, they can provide that score of that test to the university. They might require that. So other things about standardized testing. How do they decide which test to take? ACT, SAT. So there's no harm in taking both. There's not one predictor of which test is better. It's just you don't know how you will do on the test until you actually take it. There's a couple differences in it. But our general recommendation is to take one of each and then compare the scores and their comfort level in the test. So they may take both tests, or they don't have to take the actual test. They can take a practice test and see how it goes instead of going through the whole process of paying and signing up. And then only submit one set of scores depending on which score is higher. So some updates for standardized testing. The SAT and ACT at Ridge High School are offered digital. They're both digital at Ridge. However, there may be some venues where students can take a paper-based ACT. They will just have to go online and look at the test dates and find another location or high school that offers a paper-based ACT. And then those are just the links to the websites. So again, SAT is through College Board website, and then ACT is just act.org. Okay. Step 3 is programming. So I went over that in our website. So basically it's our calendar of events. Nights like this are junior parent night. our college fair, we had a financial aid night, and then, throughout the year, we host different, events. So I always recommend to go back to our website to check. And then also college visits. So I showed on the website too the college visits that we have at Ridge High School. Students kind of sign up for those, and that's a great way to meet a representative from the actual college who may be looking at their application. And that's held in the media center during the school day. They will be in person or virtual. And if it is virtual, they'll just go on their Chromebook, but they're all held in the media center. They can ask questions, they can just sit and just get information. So that's a good way. It's very accessible for students to just sign up, and it's during their school day. Okay, now I'm done. So Ms. Wu is going to take it from here.
Hello, everybody. So right now I'm going to get into, I guess, a lot of the more technical stuff, and I just wanted to remind everybody that we're going to go through a lot of information today, and I'll talk about some things that Ms. Coviello touched on in a little bit more depth. But everybody's at a different place in this whole process, so everything that we're talking about, whenever you guys have questions, definitely feel free to reach out to whoever your son or daughter's counselor is, and just let us know, if you do have any questions, because there is definitely a lot of information that we're going to go through tonight. With Naviance, this is a program that some of you may have already heard of if you had an older son or daughter. If you haven't ever heard of it, Naviance is a web-based program that houses a lot of college information, and we utilize this for various things. So your children should already be able to log on to Naviance. During their sophomore year, we had them do a career interest profiler, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I pull up Naviance to show you what that is. And if they are unable to log on, all they need to do is come down and let us know, or let one of the secretaries know. Parents do also have the ability to create their own account and log in. So if you guys don't already have an account and would like to get one, you can reach out to the counseling department secretaries and they can help set you up. And then the last thing with that is, if you did already have an older son or daughter go through Ridge and you already registered for Naviance, what you'll need to do is reach out to us to link your younger child, because you can only register using one email address. So Naviance, as I mentioned, is web-based and houses a lot of college data. It will show you information about the hundreds of different schools that are in the U.S. and even abroad. And it also does house specific information to Ridge High School students who applied and were accepted to different schools. And this is definitely, right now, over the next couple of months, this is probably the biggest thing that you'll be doing is starting to kind of research schools and build a list. So Naviance is just one tool that you can use to help you find schools to visit, and hopefully eventually figure out that list of schools that your son or daughter will be applying to. So I'm going to go through some of the things to think about as you're starting to build a list and figure out where to go visit schools, and then I'll jump into Naviance to give you a demo and show you how some of that ties into Naviance. So in terms of finding the right fit, what we talked to the students about today is really just thinking about all the different things that are important to them, and then some other pieces that tie into college search with the different options. So we discussed really thinking about their interests and strengths, which also ties to what Ms. Coviello said with academic planning, moving into senior year, what types of classes they'll want to take, and how does that tie into their career goals. So classes that they're taking that would help and be related to what they might want to major in, and that can also help them find, the different schools that they will want to add to their list based on those different majors that they're looking at. One piece that students will eventually have a better handle on would be their GPA and test scores closer to the end of their junior year. At this point in the year, the GPA that students will see on Genesis and Naviance is only based on the end of sophomore year. So when your children are applying to schools, those colleges will be looking at GPAs based on 3 years, so their freshman, sophomore, and junior year. And right now, when you look at Naviance, they're only going to have, a 2-year GPA. So this is a number that will change and help them be able to gauge a school's probability in terms of them getting into it as they get through junior year. Standardized testing, again, is another piece that will, kind of come with the school year. A lot of students only have a PSAT score at this point, so as they get through their junior year, usually in May and June, that's when the majority of students will at least have one test under their belt and really be able to start to look at where they fall with the academic standards for a school. So that's on the other side with the options to look at. There is that piece to look at in terms of academic standards. So you want to know that you meet the standards that a school has. And then you do also want to look at a few other things. So we mentioned their interest in majors, looking at what majors a school offers to decide, if that's a school you want to go to. If you really are completely undecided, it might be helpful to look at a bigger school that offers a variety of majors versus maybe a school that's more STEM-based, especially if you don't want to go in that direction. The other thing that students might want to start thinking about is where they want to go to school, if they would prefer something that's closer to home, or if they're looking to go, across the country to California. Are they looking at schools abroad? And I feel like as they start to visit schools, sometimes students start to realize what they really want to do. Right now, a lot of them might think, I want to go to school in California or Michigan. And then when they actually, travel out there to visit, they realize, I don't want to have to get on a plane to get back home during my breaks and things like that. So that's something to start to consider. The size and setting of a school is also important to think about if you want that bigger school, or if you feel like you learn better in like smaller classes and everything, you might look at smaller schools. But that's all stuff that as they visit schools, they can learn more about what a school offers. Activities is also a piece to look at, and one thing that we discussed this afternoon with students, besides just the different clubs and things that they have, are they looking at playing a varsity sport in college as well? So they would want to consider, that sport, and also what being a student at that school would be like, as well as being an athlete. And typically when students are looking at sports in their college selection process, we do recommend that they're looking at schools for not only their sport, but also just the academic fit in case they decide in a year or so that they aren't going to pursue that sport. And then cost is also something to consider as well. And I mentioned the academic fit. So one of the things that you may hear a lot would be these different terms where we talk about if a school is a safety, a target, or a reach. Sometimes you might hear people refer to them as likely schools or probable schools as well for like targets, or highly likely for safety schools. But typically what we talk about with gauging this, there's no way really to predict if you will get into a school, but you can start to gauge where you fall with a school and if it's a safety or target and reach. And one piece would be the GPA and the test scores, but we also look at the percent of applicants that are accepted. So with a safety school, students typically will exceed the academic profile, and a school will probably be accepting over 50% of their applicants as well. We do recommend students have at least 1 to 2 of these safety schools on their list. Really, in this day and age, we look at probably closer to 2 to 3. And then a target school is where a student will match the academic profile, and then they're probably accepting somewhere between 30 to 60%. A reach school is one where a student might fall below the academic profile, or maybe they meet the academic profile, but they're only accepting 8% of the applicants. So that would shift that more into the reach range. Before I move to college admissions terms, I'm going to just show you guys a demo of Naviance so you can see how some of those pieces kind of tie in. So this is the main Naviance screen. And on here, if a student clicks on About Me, they would find information on like their GPA. They would also be able to look at their test scores on here. Something to remember with this too is that all of this information is only accessible by us, so it's not something that goes to school. So I know sometimes students get worried that the test scores are on here, but it's not something that gets sent to schools. So this is where they'll see that information, and if for some reason we don't get the scores, they can bring in a copy and we can upload that information for them. And I mentioned before that we had students during their sophomore year, do the career interest profiler. So there's a link here called Self-Discovery that has that profiler and some other interest inventories and surveys that students can take. But from the career interest profiler, students were given basically their personality type and then careers that kind of matched based on people who are in those industries and what their personality type came out as well. And if a student wanted to look into those careers a little bit more, what they would be able to find is what majors some of those people studied in college, and then from there they could also find schools that offer that major. But the other piece that students can use in here to help build that college list is the advanced college search. So this is actually where they could input information like what we talked about under finding the right college, the type of school that they're looking at. You know, if they're looking at a four-year school in the city, you could select, you know, all of those different qualifiers. You could also change location to go into just selecting kind of the East Coast, so New England and Mid-Atlantic region. And there's also a students section, so that will allow students to choose the size of the school, which I'm gonna check off some of the bigger schools. And they could also look at different things on here as well. So the percent of students that are accepted. It also has a section that will list sports. And then you can also search by major and cost as well. So I don't want to put too many things in here and make the list too small, but if you click on view matches, it will show you, in this case, 24 matches. So city schools on the East Coast that were between, I think it was 10 and 15,000. And then what students can do here is if they click on a college profile, they'll get information about that school. And we always remind students to look at the school's website, so you can actually get a link to that up here. And that's where you'll get the most up-to-date information. So when you look at this page, it just gives you some general information on acceptance rate. So this was for University of Pittsburgh, 67%. College overlaps would be schools that students also applied to that applied to Pittsburgh as well. And then there's like some deadline information. But again, sometimes the information on Naviance might not be the most up-to-date with deadline, so you always want to check the school website as well. And then it gives you some quick facts, so you can see their undergraduate enrollment is a little over 19,000, and it's in a large city, and what types of degrees are offered. So that's just some information on the main page. And then the other one that I'll show you on here is under admissions. So this will give students information that's specific to Ridge High School, and it shows you the number of applicants from Ridge that applied each year, how many were accepted, and how many students enrolled. So you can kind of see, you know, that history. And then down here is a scattergram that goes over students who applied and were accepted. So Sarah's student is this little blue dot. I'm not sure if you can all see that, but she's kind of just mixed in with a lot of the greens and a couple reds. But from here, you could start to gauge if it's a safety or a target and things like that. So right now, this graph shows you where she's plotted based on her GPA and SAT. You can actually change this graph to show the ACT as well on here. And just so you know what you're looking at, the green check marks are students who applied and were accepted. The X's are students who applied and were denied. And then there's a couple circles on there. If they were blue, it was because they were waitlisted or deferred. If it's green, they were accepted after they were waitlisted or deferred. And then if it's red, it means they were denied after that. But you can actually use this to start to gauge, you know, if she's around a lot of students who are accepted, you know, depending on the percent of acceptances as well. It could be kind of like a target school. And then, you know, let's just say she was above the averages, around a ton of green, you know, that could be considered more of a safety. And then let's say she was down a little bit lower where there were, you know, less acceptances, a few more denials, that would probably be a little bit more of a reach. So this is just one resource where you can start to gauge this information. It's not, you know, the only one out there. There's also College Board. The schools post their own information as well. They'll usually have like a profile or you can look up other information that they report too. But again, this is something that is helpful, and it's also helpful because we mentioned GPA, and Ridge High School, we have what's called a weighted 4.0 GPA. Every school in the country, has a different GPA calculation, so this allows you to see where you fare compared to other students from Ridge, and it gives you that comparison there. The other thing to consider too, just on here, is because there is the ACT and the SAT graphs, sometimes students will take both the SAT and ACT, so they might be plotted on both graphs, and you might see them on the SAT plotted, and let's say they were accepted with a much lower SAT, but they could also be on the ACT graph, and that's the score that they submitted to the school. So there's a lot of different things to consider, but again, it's definitely a helpful gauge. And in terms of other things to look at here, we will use the Apply to College section a lot more as they move into senior year. So right now, the main sections that students will be using through their junior year would be the college search features here. We have a colleges I'm thinking about list, so sometimes we'll add schools for students on there for them to look at after we meet with them during their junior conferences. One other thing I do want to point out on this tab is the scholarship search. So it's a little bit misleading because it's not just scholarships, there's also programs that are listed on here. So this is something that students could look at to find different programs that might apply to them junior year that they can apply to, like Governor School will be listed on here once we receive the updated information. And then as seniors, they'll be able to look up scholarships on that section. And then the last thing I'll just kind of show you on here, I know Ms. Coviello mentioned that there is a free test prep program. So under additional information, students will be able to log into Methodize here, and they can do test prep for the SAT or the ACT on their own. Okay. All right, so back to the admissions terms. I mentioned a couple new terms as I was going through some of those graphs, so we'll touch on that in a minute, but some of the other things that you guys will start to hear as you're going through this whole process and looking at schools and deciding how you're applying to schools would be the different admissions policies. So one of the policies would be regular decision, and that's typically students applying in January, and they'll hear back at the end of like March, early April, typically. Then we do have early decision, which is the binding program. So if a student knows that that is the school for them and they want to make that commitment, that is an early decision application. So students would be signing off saying, basically, if I'm admitted to this school, that's the school that I would be attending, and then they would withdraw their other applications. That's typically done in November, and students would usually hear back mid-December. There is another policy that a lot of people confuse with it. It's early action. So early action is non-binding. So students can usually apply to more than one school early action. Early decision is only one school. Early action, you can do multiple schools typically. And the deadlines kind of mirror early decision in that it's usually November, but some schools are releasing those decisions later. It might be in December, but a lot of them are releasing those decisions in January now instead. You might also see something called single choice or restrictive early action, and for those schools, that just means you can only apply their early action, and sometimes it'll say you cannot apply to another school early decision. So again, as students are starting to make their list, they would just want to make sure, they're looking at that information closely. And then there's also rolling, which is typically if a student applies and then they'll get all those documents in, they'll hear back usually 4 to 6 weeks after. So the other piece that you guys will start to hear about too is how you're applying to colleges. There are different applications out there. Common application is one of the main ones where students will be able to fill out one general application that they can send to, I think it's up to 20 schools really, but there are hundreds of schools that use common applications. So if they create a common app account, they can apply to multiple schools. There are also college-specific applications. So again, once students start to compile their list, they'll find this information. There's also types of admissions, which I touched on in those scattergrams. So students are either accepted or they can be denied. And then we talked about deferred and waitlisted. So typically a student is deferred if they apply early to a school, and then they're deferred, which means they're rolled over to the regular pool. So then they have their application reviewed a second time, and then they would get a decision typically of accepted, denied, or waitlisted. Waitlisted means that a student, was definitely qualified, but they didn't have enough spaces. So they might waitlist students, and then usually it's after May 1st and students have deposited that they may realize they have extra spaces, and then they would reach out to students to let them know that a space opened up and give them a certain time frame to decide if they would like to attend that school. And as you guys are doing research, you'll also hear about financial aid. I'm at a lot of college presentations, so you may hear them talk about the FAFSA, and that's the free federal application. And we do host a financial aid night in senior year that you'll be able to attend and learn more. There's also something called the CSS profile, which some schools may require. So those might have to be filled out for both need-based and non-need-based loans or scholarships. So moving into step 5, we have junior conferences, and this is something that happens in March and April. Typically, we will meet with our students and go over scheduling. So we'll talk about the classes that they want to take senior year, which ties to what they're planning on doing for college. So once upon a time, these used to be separate, but we combined them into one conference because, they kind of tied to the other and helped what students were thinking about doing for college impacted what classes they were taking. So we put the two together, and we'll review senior year schedule, and also we will start to talk to them about what they're thinking about doing for postgrad, and then go over some of the later steps that we'll talk about again as well. And this is something that we'll also meet with students in January for and go over like the new program of studies information. One thing that we'll also start to talk about around junior conferences would be letters of recommendation. So typically students, as part of the college application process, will need to get letters of recs as well. So we do encourage students to start thinking about who they would want to write their letters. It's not something they have to do right now, but we kind of put this out there so that they can start to think about who they have a pretty good relationship for, and really during junior conferences, that's when students might start to figure out who they would like to write a letter. And we do typically recommend thinking about at least 2 teachers, but once students know where they're applying, they'll have a better idea of how many letters they'll need. And we already talked about college visits a lot. We had the college visits that happen in the media center, but from now through the end of the year, it's a great time to also start going out to visit schools yourselves and bring your kids to see what a school is like. A lot of schools do information sessions and tours, and as they move into the spring, they'll do special programming for juniors that are starting this whole process as well. So this is something that we do encourage students to do. And there are definitely also a lot of virtual visits as well. So on a college's website, they might have a virtual tour that students can do, or there's a website called UVisit that you can look at virtual visits for schools on. I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Kukrow now.
Okay, can we give it up for Ms. Wu, who does like the best Naviance demonstrations ever? Good job, Peg. Okay, so Ms. Coviello and Ms. Wu have taken us through the first 7 steps. So I'm going to take you through the remainder of the steps, but before I do that, I'm going to talk about this awesome graphic that we have created. That's one of our favorites. This is probably like the #1 question that we get asked as counselors. The components of the application. What goes into a decision that is being made on the college's end? So I'm going to walk you through that. In the center is the transcript, and it's in the center for good reason. The majority of the amount of time that an admissions officer will spend reviewing the entire application is spent on the transcript. You saw a picture of that before. They will see the courses and grades listed for the first 3 years of high school, and then they will see the courses listed that the student has signed up for senior year. So they're going to look at all 4 years. Sometimes we hear students say, well, I heard junior year is most important, or that's most important. They're really taking a look at everything. What did that student do over the 4 years that they've been here? Are there any trends? How did they progress through? What did they choose to take? Okay, so that's in the center because they do spend the most amount of time looking at that. Then we'll go up to like kind of 12 o'clock, and I'll go clockwise. So the rest of the things on this list kind of vary in importance depending on the school. And that's a term, we kind of laugh about it in our department, but it's something that we say a lot. It depends on the college. Colleges very much vary in the way that they do things, handle things, their policies, how they go about their business. So we told your students today it's really important to visit the college websites, know what each school is looking for, and kind of just make sure you're keeping on top of those details. So standardized testing is one of the things we spoke about tonight, so that's going into the review, and that can be anything from, as Ms. Coviello mentioned, test blind was they're not looking at the SAT and ACT scores. Even if your child were to send them, they don't review them because they don't find them necessary at that particular school. I spoke to a rep earlier at a rep visit one time this year, and I said, well, what happens if they enter it in the common application? Do you see that? And he said, no, it's actually grayed out. We black it out in the application so we don't even see it because we've decided as an institution that this isn't important for us when we're reviewing the application. So everything from that, test blind, we don't want them, to test optional, right? You take the exam, you decide if you think it's going to be helpful, you send that particular score, or you don't. And then the small number of schools that do require students to send it. So again, that's part of that like deeper dive to find out this particular school, what are they looking for, what do I need to send, what's required and what's not, and how should I proceed. Okay, let's go over to school profile data. That is a document that is sent to every school to which a student applies. It's a document that explains the type of town that Basking Ridge is, what type of school we are, averages, the course offerings that we have, a lot of different information. It's 5 or 6 pages long. So it just gives the college an opportunity to evaluate your student in context of the high school that they attend. And it's an informational piece that goes along with every it's in the same file as the transcript when we send to the colleges. Next is rigor of available curriculum. When Ms. Smith earlier said that when you get one of us, you get all of us, we talked about this piece a lot over the last couple of days because we wanted to make sure we were clear about it. Sometimes when we say rigor of available curriculum, that makes people get nervous about that. Meaning does that mean I have to take all honors or all AP classes? No, it doesn't. It's rigor of appropriate available curriculum. So what a college is looking to see is that you took appropriately challenging courses. That doesn't necessarily mean signing up for the highest level classes if that's not something that fits for your child. Okay, so it really is about finding a balance. It's about them taking classes they like, classes in areas of interest if they have that at this point, and not just taking classes just to take them to be in them. That could mean also, we require 3 years of math and 2 years of a world language. Did you exceed that? Did you take more than what was available? So there are very many ways to show who your child is and what context of that is, and rigor just doesn't mean just taking all the highest level classes that we offer. Okay, personal essay. So this is a writing sample. Most colleges are looking for this. On the common application, there are 6 or 7 different options that students can choose from. They'll pick the topic, they'll write the essay, and it's sent to each school to which they apply. The important piece here is that the essay is written by the student. So if you are a 17-year-old male, you should not be sounding like a 50-year-old woman writing it, okay? So if you're working with someone, if it's great, we tell the students, have someone proofread it, but it really should be their voice. I do think that sometimes the essay is maybe the most overthought, kids overthink it because they think, I have to write about something magnificent, or I have to write about I found the cure to this obscure disease. No, they're 17 and 18 years old. It really just is a writing sample. It's a way for the student's voice to be communicated in the application. It's not a number, it's not a GPA, it's not an SAT score. Think small story, think something that illustrates a quality or characteristic about your child. That's what they want to hear, okay? They know 17 and 18-year-old people are writing these essays. Okay, letters of recommendation. This also varies. Some schools, Ms. Wu pulled up UPitt earlier, University of Pittsburgh. They're a big school, they're not looking at letters of recommendation. So it can be something that schools are not looking at, to schools that will say, we require 2 teacher letters of recommendation. So when I say we need to go to the websites and we need to make sure we know what they're looking for, this is one of those pieces, right? Because if you go to the website and they say, we require 2 academic letters, That means 2 teachers. The counselors write for every student, and it just actually goes as part of that application package that we send with the transcript and the profile data that I was talking about. So that's why we don't count, we don't teach them. We send it along, but it's not an academic letter. So it's kind of like keeping track of every school and what are the requirements for each one of those schools. Okay, so some schools will look at those and some schools don't place a lot of value on those. Special skills and talents, that's like athletics, if you're an artist, if you play an instrument, things that they could be looking at as they're evaluating the application if that's relevant to you. Other factors are things like potentially legacy, geographic diversity. Are you applying to a school that's looking for New Jersey students? Are you applying to a major at a particular school that they're really trying to, enroll more students in? That could be a factor as well. Did you do an interview? So these are just other things that can be used in the consideration of making that decision of admission or not. The recalculated GPA. So schools are getting, as Ms. Wu mentioned, transcripts and information and grades from all over the United States and overseas. So we tell students, we told them today not to really truly heavily focus on their GPA here, because many schools will do what's called recalculation. And we don't know the formula, they don't tell us, but they are trying to kind of level the playing field a little bit, and they will assign different values to different things as they see fit. They could take out certain courses that we offer here that do go into our GPA. So we tell students try not to get too hung up on that number, because many of the schools are recalculating it anyway to get it to a number that I guess reflects their values of that particular school. Okay, so all of those pieces are going into, like, when admissions people sit down and how are they looking at it, these are the main things that they are taking into consideration. Oh, what happened? Okay, we're on step 8. So this is something we told your students today. This is like a future thing. Like we said, just hear us and listen and keep it in the back of your mind. This is something we're going to remind you about. We're going to post it in our Google Classroom starting in March. This is after the junior conferences. So many parents are asking, okay, well, how can I help and what can I do as part of this process? This is one of those things. Because as part of this senior packet part A, there's something called a parent brag sheet, which is exactly that. You get to brag to us about how great and awesome your kid is. And what this does for us is that it helps us write a very personalized letter of recommendation with more tidbits of information that we just might not know. We ask the students questions about themselves, and I think yours is 5 questions that you'll answer. We read the student section and we read the parent section, and of course what we know of the student over working with them for 4 years, and we put together a really nice personalized letter of recommendation. So we ask students to do this, they'll turn it in the Google Classroom, and that's due in the beginning of June. So we told the students today this is kind of far off, and we will talk about it in the junior conference, we'll send reminders about it, but when they say, excuse me, Mom or Dad, you have to do this parent brag sheet, this is what they are referring to. Okay, step 9 is getting organized over the summer, and I know it's cold and rainy and windy tonight, and the summer seems far off, but we do get a lot of questions about well, what should I be doing over the summer? And it's a really, really good question, right? Because senior year comes and we hit the ground running, right? A lot of these deadlines are early in the school year, starting as early as October 15th, November 1st. So to prepare over the summer, just kind of ease your mind as you go into the school year, not to mention, by the way, they're taking classes, doing their activities, sports, everything else. There's a bunch of things that can be done over the summer. So number 1, familiarize yourself with application requirements. Take some time, make a folder for each school, go through the websites, make sure you are totally clear on what each school is requiring to kind of keep it straight. The reality is that students are applying to a large number of schools, so it can be hard to keep track. So this is a good time when the pressure's off, it's the summer, to kind of go through and just make sure you know exactly what is required of each school. The second thing is begin to draft the essay. What we tell our students is go ahead and you can Google the Common Application essay prompts. So just read them, because we know that sometimes when you're not thinking about something, an idea pops into your head, or you're driving in the car, or you're sitting at dinner, and somebody brings up something, excuse me, I'm so sorry, and somebody could say that would be a great topic for an essay. So just have it in the back of your mind and start to think about it, so that if an idea does come, it's not the pressure of sitting down at the computer okay, what am I writing? So that's a good thing to start over the summer. It is an assignment for the English classes, so it's kind of like 2 for the price of 1. They'll get a grade for doing something they already have to do. So if they already have that idea handy, they can even start to like jot down some notes or ideas. I'm like, grab your phone, put some notes in your notes app, just to get the ball rolling. Okay, create the Common Application account. We talked about the Common App. That's a widely used application. Many schools are utilizing that. So they can create the account. They can type in their name, their address, your name, like the different things that don't require too much brain power, but just check it off the list. And now when you start senior year, you will have filled in some of that information. It takes it off your plate for doing it in senior year. Okay, continue the college visits, right? Summer might be a time where you just have more time to go visit schools. You can definitely continue doing that. Revising your list. The revision of the list can happen. This is a process. You do not need to come into senior year with a set list. We're gonna ask you for where you're thinking about, but you can change that. There is time still to kind of continue researching and looking and updating or changing your list. Senior Packet Part A is due in June, but if for some reason it doesn't get turned in June, the summer's a really great time to make sure you get that done. And then Senior Packet Part B we'll talk about in a second. And then begin gathering the documents for the financial aid process. As Ms. Wu mentioned, that's something we'll talk about much more over the coming months. Okay, Senior Packet Part B. That's like the Part 2. The Part A I talked about, right, with the questionnaires that help us write the letter of recommendation. Part B is just like another check-in point. Again, this is not until the beginning of senior year, which is like, I know that seems far off right now, but we're just planting the seed right now. This is kind of like another checkpoint. We'll ask students, what does your list look like at this point? What teachers are writing your letters of recommendation? We'll have parents sign off that we can send the transcript. So we usually have that due within the first couple weeks of school. And it's just a touch base point for us to move through the process with them as seniors. It's always good to remind you to keep your usernames and passwords in a safe place, so we put that there. Again, that Notes app in your phone or wherever you want to put it, just so you remember your logins when you go back to doing things in the fall of senior year. What did I do? Yikes, sorry. Okay, all right, so this is a visual for those of you who like to see things kind of like organized in one pretty little picture. This is like an outline. This is not like, you don't have to adhere to this, but if you're wondering like just recommendations on timing, like when should we be doing this or what should we be doing now, which is a really valid question. This is just like a rough outline. You can kind of stray from this or you can utilize it. It kind of summarizes all of the things that we talked about tonight and just gives you, some times that these things occur. We said to your students today, and it's worth mentioning tonight, that it's November of junior year. They have a long time. I know sometimes when we do these presentations, and I know they all came home and talked to you about it right away, right? Oh wait, no they didn't. But we said to them, you have a long time. This is just the beginning. This is where we kind of give the information, we give them time to process it. After tonight's meeting, we're obviously gonna meet with them one-on-one. We've said it a couple times, they're all in different places and that is completely fine. So just take some time to digest this and move through the process and just start somewhere. I think that's the most important part. This can be really overwhelming and scary, but I think once you start to begin to do it, you're going to start to feel a little more empowered and feel ownership of it and feel like more confident in doing it. Even if you've had an older child that's already done it, every student is different. So just start somewhere, and we're here to help you. We have lots of years of experience. We share information constantly with each other. We really enjoy doing that. So we're here for you. That's the end of the informational part of the presentation, but there is one more part to the presentation. So a little known fact about Miss Trainer is that in a previous lifetime, she was a game show host. No, she actually wasn't, but you'll see what I mean. Just keep that in your mind. This is Miss Trainer. She's here for Trainer Trivia.
All right, thank you to my colleagues. Appreciate it, what great information. So I do want to officially welcome you to the question and answer portion of the presentation. When Ms. Smith described our department, she said that we were a fun department. So we do have to live up to that reputation. So before I do that, I just want to get like a feel for the crowd. Like, who's ready for some fun? Yes, okay. I love it. Even like on a rainy night, like I love your enthusiasm, so thank you. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we are gonna have a traditional Q&A, but we're gonna first start with some trivia. Your participation is voluntary. Don't worry, I'm not gonna randomly call on you. But to encourage you to participate, I do have some prizes, okay? So, let me get to my slide. Are we ready for some fun? Okay, so our first question, hold on, let me get to my questions. Okay, so the first two are a little bit on the easier side because it is content that we talked about. So I have my colleagues with some microphones to help out to answer. What type of application policy is a binding agreement? Okay, so we need somebody on this side. I saw that hand first over there in the jacket, so we'll go ahead. Yes, early decision, woohoo! You're gonna get your prize. Okay, so right, early decision is that binding agreement. Most seniors are applying with an early decision deadline of November 1st or 15th, and they typically will find out sometime before our winter break, okay? Some schools do have an early decision 2 deadline, which is January. We will talk more about that senior year, but there is usually, sometimes there's an ED1 and an ED2. Great, thank you. Okay, winner, there we go. Round 2. Okay, just kidding, we didn't cover this content, but so this is a little bit tricky. So we did talk about college rep visits. So now the question is, we just concluded hosting all of our rep visits for the fall. How many did the RHS Counseling Department host? How many college visits did we have? Whoa, okay, hands, okay, we had a hand over here. We're gonna go ahead. Yes, 72, that is the answer. So college reps they happen in the fall. Seniors sign up and they attend them in the media center as we talked about. So we had 72 rep visits, and just because I like talking about, numbers, that means we had about 433 students participate. So that's a really big number. So our students are taking advantage of this opportunity. We love that we are able to offer this. Again, if your student did not participate in any of the college rep visits, that's absolutely okay. They will have the opportunity to do so next year in their senior year. Okay, winner, okay. Question 3, content we did talk about. True or false? Ridge offers a free SAT, ACT prep program. I saw your hand. Yes, true. Okay, where can you find it? Yes, okay, perfect, right, Methodize. Methodize is our, yes, round of applause. Methodize is our free SAT, ACT prep program. Students can access it on Naviance. They can log in and they can select ACT, SAT, they can take practice tests, quizzes, lessons. It's a great resource. Encourage your student to take advantage of it. Okay. Ooh, this is tricky. Okay. How many transcripts did the class of 2024 submit? So last year's class. How many transcripts did the class of 2024 submit? Okay. You're good, you're right. There you go, right. The answer is 4,518, which actually means that the average number of applications was about 10.1. And if there's any Swiftie fans here, there are some Easter eggs in those answers. Okay, so that concludes trainer trivia for the night. Thank you for your participation. Please do not worry, because I have a feeling that trainer trivia might make an appearance senior year at senior parent night. So make sure we are prepared for that. So we are now gonna open it up to your time to ask questions. I have a couple of my colleagues here. We're going to go around and answer your questions. I see there's a question over here. I can take that side. I'm sorry. You're going to answer, right?
Thank you. I might have missed this because I was in traffic and got here about 10 minutes late. So the information you provided is so relevant and so helpful. but particularly with respect to like the elements of an application and exactly how to navigate through Naviance. Is all of that provided to the students?
Yes.
There you go. It's on.
Yes, we provided that this morning. We met with all the juniors this morning.
So when it comes to, like Naviance, I feel that students can be intimidated by it, and I just want to make sure that they're really, sort of provided the tools to be able to navigate through it. It's still a complex application, and I just want to make sure that they are maybe presented with with the functionality of Naviance maybe on more than one occasion, just so that they start to feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, so we do go over Naviance with them several times. So last year, they navigated the career section of Naviance. In this presentation this morning, we showed them the same thing that we showed you about what some of the functions are when it comes to the college search information. And then when we sit with them individually in junior conferences, we'll actually go over if they have any schools that they've already looked at. We'll show them how to look, for example, at the graphs for those schools. We will talk to them about some of the nuances that, listen, we said today, but like, listen, they're teenagers. Do they hear anything we say? Like, definitely not all of it, right? And hopefully some of it. So even going over things like, remember that the graph you're looking at plots both your GPA and your SAT score or ACT score. You might not be using an SAT or ACT, or the person who was accepted with this little green check may not have used their SAT or their ACT. So we kind of explain to them how to understand and interpret graphs. We remind them that there could be differences, for example, in the way that a graph would appear if it were only students who applied for a business major or only students who applied for a nursing major, explaining that the nuances of certain programs or that some programs are more competitive than others. So these are all questions that we try to arm them with so that when they are going on visits, if they want to know, is my program going to be more competitive, assuming that they know what they want to major in, that these are questions they can start to ask when they are at visits, for example.
Great. Where's our next question? Okay.
Over here, straight
You displayed and thank you for doing this. This is great, by the way. You displayed on the screen a transcript that only showed the final grade for each year, for each class. My question is that how colleges will see the transcript? Is that how transcripts are sent to the colleges, or will they actually see all the individual grades for each marking period?
That's actually what our transcripts look like. And so if you log into Genesis, you could be able to see, but that's what they look like. And at the junior conference, the students will also get an official copy of their transcript through the halfway point of junior year. And then when we meet with them again senior year, we give them an unofficial copy that shows their weighted cumulative GPA through the end of junior year. So that's a 6-semester GPA they'll use when they apply to college. So it's all final grades only.
Yeah, so there's two major differences that they'll see when we actually send a transcript. All of the grades and the credits will be filled in from junior year, and then the courses from senior year will be listed in that 4th category. So no grades will be on the transcript, since only final grades are sent on a transcript, but the courses that they are enrolled in for their senior year will appear, and all of the junior year information will be there. We also talk with the kids about how each year we create a GPA for them so that you can see any trends in their transcript. So I realize that this might be a little bit hard to see, but on their transcript you'll see the GPA weighted from their freshman year, from their sophomore year, from their junior year, so that way you can see if there are trends, from one year to another. The other thing that we reminded students of today when we talked to them about this transcript is to help give them that perspective of that one quiz that you're losing your mind over right now, or that one assignment, that one presentation. Nobody sees those, right? So what's there is the final grade. So they've got more than half of their junior year left. So if there are courses that they're struggling in, we really encourage them, come seek us out. Let's talk about ways that maybe you can work with your teacher on trying to improve in those areas. Keep in mind that, there is room for growth, and not one test or one quiz or whatever is going to show up on a transcript.
Okay, we have a question here. Thank you. I was wondering if you could just comment on the SATs and ACTs. I think a small number of schools have started requiring them again, and I'm wondering, do you think more schools will be requiring them next year? And also, do you help advise the students as to whether or not they should submit them?
So, listen, some of what you're asking is like the $64,000 question, right? Like, wouldn't we love to know how many places are going to go back to requiring them? What's really interesting is that the flavor that I get from a lot of college admissions reps when they are here for the college visits are, we're perfectly happy doing things the way we're doing things right now. Like, they don't necessarily feel like they're missing something by not having standardized testing. So listen, the schools that did went back pretty quickly, right? Some of them have already gone back to requiring. Some of them never stop requiring if you're in the state of Florida and you're in a public school. So it just depends on the school and what their maybe value system is in terms of how they want to evaluate candidates. But we are hearing from a lot of schools that they seem fairly happy with the way that they're doing things right now. That being said, some schools announce standardized test policies in chunks, meaning that they say for the next 2 years or for the next 3 cycles. So they will actually, if you look at their policy, some of them are already extended to people who are applying for the fall of 2026. Some of them are not. So we have told students that right now, the best advice we can provide them is sit for them, see how you do on them. Just like we said to them long before COVID, if you are not a fantastic standardized test taker, there is no reason for you to panic. Fairtest.org existed prior to COVID. There have always been schools that have been test optional, that have believed that 3+ years of transcript work is more important than 2 Saturdays of your life, right? So the overarching messaging that we try to provide them is standardized testing should not be something that you fear. If you're great at it, perfect. It's something that's sort of like icing, like you provide it if it's helpful. If a school requires it, they either become a school that becomes reachier for you, becomes one that maybe you decide falls off of your list if you're not a strong standardized test taker, or you take it again and you see if you can bring up your score and get more in the realm of what they're looking for if they're a school that's going to require testing. So we talk about it with them right now in that sort of like, we encourage you to take it right now so that you have it if you need it. And then when we sit down with them for their junior conference, if they have a list of schools and we know that there are ones that do require it, we really drive home the idea of like, okay, so you probably want to sit for maybe another standardized test because your schools actually, some of them do require it, so you want to try to have, the best score that you can have. We talk to them about how many times they've already potentially taken it. In senior year, that's when we really talk to them about their list because that is their finalized list. For the most part, it's not etched in a stone, but it's, the list that is more likely to be the one that they are utilizing to apply. And then we start talking about, should you send to this school? Should you send to that school? We use something that is called the common data set. We suggest to students that they Google the name of the school and the words common data set. Every school is required to provide data that shows a plethora of different things, but one of the things is their standardized test information, the percentage of applicants who have provided SAT, the percentage of applicants who have provided ACT, and then what their median 50% is, and then also the 25th percentile and the 75th percentile. And what we say to students is, if you are submitting testing, assuming it's not required, and you're submitting testing, you basically want to be in at least that 50th percentile in order to feel fairly confident that that score is at least not hurting you. How much it helps you if you're only in the middle of 50th percentile isn't much, right? You're sort of just where they kind of want you to be at, like, this is sort of our middle. But if they're above that, that's a really good place to be, because then you're actually providing a score that's really kind of helpful to your application. Maybe it even gives you a little boost. But it's a way for them to gauge how they fall compared to previous year's applicants and whether they should send that score or consider withholding that score.
First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It's very, very good. I have two questions. First one, this passing summer, original Ridge High said they don't host the summer August SAT, then eventually add one. So for the coming summer, are you planning to have one in August? This is the first question. The second question, would you recommend skip school to visit college during, not necessarily spring break, but during the semester where like more college students are on campus versus just squeeze everything in the summer? Those are the two questions. Thank you.
It's like you heard me talking today. So, I mean, the first question, I would really direct you to Mr. Misiak for the first question. He is in charge of SAT and ACT testing at Ridge High School, so he would really be the better person to tell you whether they are definitely going to have an August SAT or not. I don't want to say yes or no and then have him be like, actually, that's not what we're doing this year. So I would definitely reach out to Mr. Misiak. He's our science supervisor, also in charge of standardized testing. In terms of your second question, is it a good idea to either miss school or go during a spring break, or at least a time when schools are in session to visit college campuses? That is ideal. That's actually something that Mrs. Trainer and I told our, I mean, I'm assuming a lot of people might have told their students today, but in our specific session, we told our students, it is ideal if you can do that. It doesn't mean that you can't ever see a school during the summer. Seeing a school during the summer gives you, what's it like around the college campus? Is it more of a city atmosphere? What's it feel like to be there? What's the distance from your house? It's amazing how your kids want to go really far until you stick them in a car with you for like 5+ hours, and then all of a sudden going really far, it doesn't seem as appealing to them as it once did. So you want to get that kind of a feel from a college visit as well, but you can't feel what it feels like to be on the campus with what it would be like to be a student there unless you go when the school is in session. So it is really ideal to see it when it's in session, if possible. Yeah, 3 days are excused for college visits. Colleges typically start in August. Mm-hmm. Yes, they end before we do, but they start before we do. Yes, that's a good point, that sometimes you get maybe about 2 weeks in August before we start, assuming your child is not a football player, fill in the blank thing that happens in August anyway. But yes, so sometimes that will work really well for students to go in August.
Do we have any other questions? Okay.
Hey, thank you for the presentation tonight. So I had two questions. One was in reference with the weighted and the unweighted GPA. I think it is the weighted GPA that appears on the in Genesis. I wanted to understand from a student and a parent perspective, what's the best targeted? I mean, both have their equal importance, but what is the best what do schools basically look at primarily? And the second question I had was, I mean, there are so many tasks that will basically require a compilation and coordination between students, parents, and school. Like, how does that happen? Like, because everyone is new, especially parents who, like, I have just one child, so it's just a new journey for many parents. How does the entire compilation and, the entire process go smoothly? Like, is it like just Naviance, we just look at Naviance, or how does that happen throughout the entire, school year? Yeah, thank you.
Could you just clarify the first question? What do they look at, the weighted or unweighted? Just the GPA was the question? Yeah, so we only issue a weighted GPA, so that's all they're gonna receive from Ridge High School. So if they asked for an unweighted, we don't calculate that. So they'll take what's on our transcript. And the reputation of Ridge High School is very, very strong. So the colleges know what we release. It's on our profile, and we're not recalculating it. They can, if they want to, they can recalculate it. Any college can do that. But we will only issue the weighted GPA that the students have been receiving since freshman year. And then in terms of the different steps, so as we mentioned, to the students this morning, and we mentioned tonight, is we will be having one-on-one college planning conferences with every junior. And so that's the very individualized counseling approach, where we'll be reviewing with them. We meet with them every year, obviously for academic planning. We meet with them sophomore year when we go over careers and we talk about activities. So every year we have different touch points where we're meeting with each grade level as both a group and then small groups and then individually. And then for junior year, that's where we're focusing on the college planning piece or whatever their post-secondary, goals may be. So that's where we'll be taking, a deeper look into their transcript, their test scores. What are their goals? What types of schools are they thinking if they're going to be applying? What does that list look like? We show them on Naviance. We show them what we're looking at, how the colleges will interpret it. We'll actually, we pull back that curtain and say, okay, so this was the colleges we'll see. Well, why is this student admitted and these students aren't admitted? What does it mean when there's red, blue, and green on top of each other? Like, how come some kids get in and others don't? So we share everything we know that we've, collected from our experiences and from working with the college admission reps. And so students will leave with a list in Naviance. They'll leave with, a to-do list of things that they need to work towards. I think Ms. Coviello showed earlier our website in terms of we break it down when it comes to actually applying. So if you were to go onto our website, you're going to see a checklist for seniors. Here are all the steps you need to take. We answer in advance all the questions they could have when it comes to filling out the Common App. So obviously, the schools close over the summer, but as they're moving through every single question on the Common App, we have a guide for that. So between the website, where we have permanent resources, our presentations that are taped and posted there, you could visit and look at what we said to the seniors this year, and then the one-on-one approach that we give to the students, when we're meeting with them, and they all know they can come back. A lot of times I'll have students come back after spring break visits, right? So we have their conference in March, and then they maybe take more tests or they're going to be doing visits, and they know, come back and see me if something has changed. We'll open up back your file. And so all my colleagues work similarly. The student drives the process because obviously the parent's not applying, and we're accessible to answer those questions, but I would say we work very, very closely with each kid. It's very individualized for a large public school.
Yeah, the one thing that I definitely want to drive home is that while we present the same presentation we gave the students this morning to you as parents so that you know what they've heard, you have to remember that it's so that you know what they've heard. It's not so that you can do what they need to do, right? It becomes very difficult sometimes as a parent when you see your kid being really busy or you see them get really overwhelmed to not want to be like, I'll help you with that. And by help you with that, what I mean is I'll do it for you because it's easy and I'll just do it and I can get it done in 10 minutes. It's so hard not to do that, but it's so important that you don't, because when students are going through this process, I cannot tell you the number of times that, well, first of all, we catch a lot of we's. Like, we're applying to, and you're like, who you going with? Like, it's confusing, but it's definitely something that you want to try to avoid. Also, saying to a student, did you apply there? And they look at you and they're like, I don't know. And you're like, what? Like, if you don't know, who's gonna know? And the answer, unfortunately, is sometimes several other people in your house, just not you. And that's really problematic. They really need to be taking control of this process. What I tell students all the time, and I can tell them this as a parent of a current college freshman, is that you will be well prepared when you go to college. Academically, you will be well prepared. What you have to remember as a parent is that you want them to be well prepared from all other aspects, right? You want them to be able to handle when something is confusing, like, who do I go and ask? Because the answer to that question when they're in college is definitely not you, because you're gonna be like, I actually have no idea, and I can't find it on their website, and nobody will talk to me, and I don't know what to do. So they need to know what to do. So this is the time for us to set them up to have success later on. So I want you to understand that when there are times that we say things like, your child really needs to do that, or we answer an email and say, please have your child come down and ask that question, it is not because we don't want to help, and it is not because we're trying to be difficult. It is because we are trying to save you from yourself, because it is really hard, and I promise you, I know it because I just did it as both a parent and a school counselor. It's really hard not to just be like, let me just do it. Can you imagine I do this for a living and I had to let someone else next to me do it for themselves? It's difficult, but I would really recommend that that be something that you try to remind yourself throughout this process.
I think we all too can appreciate how scary this could be though, right? Because what are we doing? Are we missing anything? So like the goals of this year really are like the things we presented tonight. It's you're gathering information this year. Like almost take the pressure off. Like we'll do a similar presentation to this when senior year hits with like, okay, now it's senior year. How do you apply? What do you do? We're always here for questions. But this year really is just like the gathering, the visiting, the looking, the taking the tests, the talking about letters of recommendation. Like those are your goals for this year. And then we'll move into other goals for next year. And you're not alone. We're here.
Hi, thanks. I know the whole process has changed so much since at least I went through it. Like, all I'm hearing is that kids are applying to way more schools than we used to do it. And how does it translate into visits? Like, I didn't apply to any school I didn't visit, but I don't think that's the case anymore. That seems like it's changed a lot. Can you just elaborate on your experience a little bit? Thank you.
So the, oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Sue.
That's a really great question. And we do have students all the time saying, you know, I want to go to school in California, I want to go to school in the West Coast. Well, you can't hop on a plane every weekend to go visit those schools. We do recommend, and because we live in a state that does offer a wide variety of types of schools, so even if your student isn't thinking about, let's just say Rutgers, but Rutgers is a big state school, take a look at Rutgers to see what it would be like to have to take a bus to each of your classes, or to live in a dorm that's like very far from the main part of the heart of campus. You could say the same thing about a small private school. So New Jersey offers a bunch of opportunities to visit schools that your student might not necessarily apply to, but you can go and look at to see, like, okay, let me get a framework of what it would be like to, you know, go to a small school, medium-sized school, or a large school.
You don't have to visit all either. You don't have to do like one size fits all. You can go see some, not go to see others. Some kids will get in and then say, if I get in, then I'm going to go visit. Obviously, before you hit the deposit, you should go see it. But you can just kind of play it by ear. You're right. There are many more schools they are applying to. I think Ms. Trainer said the average was 10.1. That's definitely what we're seeing. Not that you need to buy into that necessarily. That is the average, but like what's right for your particular student might just be less schools, and that's totally fine.
Yeah, I think that's really important, is to make it a doable process. They don't have to be applying to a ton of schools. 20 schools fit on the Common App. There's a reason for that.
I just wanted to just add to that, because I've gone through this with my daughter as well, that I don't think we need to feel any pressure to go and visit these schools. It's can be expensive, it can be completely impractical. You know, I think it's amazing that, you know, they have these virtual tours now that they certainly didn't have when we were applying to college. So that's a really good start. And then once the kids, and maybe they could go and see a couple just to kind of have the experience of, you know, feeling what a campus is like and getting the vibe of the campus. I think the time to visit a school is, you know, more sensible once the kids get into a school, and then, you know, you've got to decide between these 2-3 schools, which ones, you know, which one is the right one.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly say to you know, the point that you made earlier, you may not be able to see every school before you apply. I do think certainly before you are pressing deposit, that seeing that school, understanding the distance, understanding what it would look like to travel there, keeping in mind that when you go to travel there for a visit, you're bringing one bag. When you go to move in, it's not going to look the same way. So just the logistics need to be something that your student's keeping in mind.
Hello. So quick question. So I saw a graph, scatter graph, where it gave some statistics about how, you know, previous students have applied to different colleges and where the particular candidate stands. Is that just college by college, or does it include like program of studies, or like is it refined that way, or is just like you know, a high level?
Naviance is only college, so within the university. It doesn't break down what the major was. It doesn't break down what college within the university they may have applied. That's usually contextual information as counselors we can offer the students during their junior conferences, but it doesn't break it down in those data points.
And how far back does it go in terms of like number of years?
She keeps it at 5 years, right? Yeah,
5
5 years. So really anything before the pandemic is not as relevant anymore. once we shifted to test optional, but it's 5 years of data.
Thank you,
So it's
appreciate
pretty
it.
tight.
Thanks.
Yeah, one of the things we shared with students today is that trends can also flip very quickly. We've had some, for example, out-of-state flagship universities announce to us, we've over-enrolled out-of-state students. We're now going to be looking at significantly decreasing the number of out-of-state students that we're accepting. So sometimes we will say to students that have a certain school on their list, here's my caveat, when you look at the graph, it's not going to tell you the whole story, right? So that's what keeps humans in business, is that sometimes you need a human being to interpret data.
Hi, just a very short one. The voluntary credits that the students get, which part of that flow chart does it fall into? The voluntary works that they have to do, the credits that they get.
You mean community service?
Yeah.
Okay, so students don't receive credits for community service. They do, in their history class in sophomore year, have a requirement to complete that has to do with what grade they've earned that marking period, but there is no requirement for volunteer work other than just that sophomore year requirement. We have done in past years as a building, like a community service day, but again, the students are not getting credit for those. Those are things that students put into their resume and will put on the activities list in the Common Application, where they're able to put up to 10 activities in the Common Application.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for coming tonight. As we mentioned, our presentations are always available on our counseling department website under the events and presentations link. So please make sure that you are checking back there. We'll send out a blast when it's available, but we do have all of our previous presentations on there, and we'll of course be putting all future presentations on there as well as our schedule for any upcoming presentations. We appreciate you coming out. We know it's an ugly night, so thank you for coming and spending it with us. We appreciate that.